Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sappy Hour. We're just waiting for some of you to enter into the webinar, and we'll get started in just a couple seconds. Okay. All right, now we're streaming. Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody to really our first Sappy Hour of this particular breeding bird season. For those of you who have never joined us for a Sappy Hour before, it's essentially a very casual happy hour style hour where that's inspired by the yellow-bellied sapsucker, which is the logo bird of the Breeding Bird Atlas. But essentially, we kind of talk as a group about a particular topic in atlasing. And then for the second half of the hour, so we just take all of your questions about what has been talked about, but also just about the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas as a whole and anything that you may want to know about it. Yeah, but before I really get started and, we introduce the topic and the people who will be speaking today, we start as always properly with a land acknowledgement. And so I realize that people are probably joining us from all over the province, maybe even from further away, but wherever you do happen to be tonight, you're joining us from Indigenous territories and treaty lands. And where I happen to be in Toronto area, these are the traditional territories and treaty lands of a number of different people. So in particular, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as other Anishinaabe of the Williams Treaty First Nations, also the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of 6 nations, and in particular, one of them, the Seneca, and also the Huron-Wendat. And if you yourself are not aware of whose treaty lands and traditional territories you happen to be in right now, we're going to put a link in the chat, both on Facebook and here in Zoom, where we happen to be meeting, with a great resource so that you can look it up and learn a little bit about it. Okay. So now that we've done our acknowledgement, yeah, it may seem like it's a little bit too early to talk about atlasing, but the breeding season actually has started for some of Ontario's birds, and in particular, the ones that we're going to be talking about tonight, which are owls. We probably will have a lot of questions about owls tonight. So if you are joining us on Zoom and in this webinar tonight, just be aware that you can ask questions of our speakers and of the panel in general, but just by putting your questions in the Q&A tab, make sure that you don't put your questions in the chat tab, but in the Q&A tab. It will be a lot easier to keep track of them there. And if you see a question that you like in that Q&A tab, just feel free to like it because it will shoot to the top of the list and get answered faster and earlier, which is great. And if you are joining us from Facebook, we'll be monitoring that too. You can just put any of your questions or your comments or your feedback or anything that you want us to know right into the comments under the video. Okay, so that's Zoom and Facebook. Welcome. So yeah, we're going to be talking about early season atlasing. We're going to be talking about owls. And by now, I think that the faces on your screen are probably pretty familiar. My name is Emily Rondell. I'm just an Atlas volunteer, but I'm joined by some, I think all our Atlas staff, maybe not, but I'll just say who they are. You probably know them well. Kaylin Bumelis, who's the assistant coordinator of the Atlas, Adam Timp, who works on northern surveys and a whole variety of things for the Atlas, and Mike Burrell, who's the head of the Significant Species Committee, and probably a bunch of other stuff that I'm forgetting about right now. And we're going to start off this evening with Adam, who's going to be talking about some of the owl surveys that you can start doing very shortly, or maybe now.
Hi, everyone. Just going to try and share my screen. How's that? Can everybody see that?
Looks good.
Okay. Who wants to do some owl surveys? In this presentation, we're going to focus on 2 of the surveys. Basically, oh, already messed up. How do I go back? I'm worse
Try clicking on the presentation and going back.
I'm worse than Cadman. I'm flying through it.
If you press your left arrow key, it should probably go back.
Perfect. Okay, let's start that again. Okay, so we're going to focus mainly on the Eastern Screech-Owl survey because that one is widespread in Southern Ontario and it starts on March 1st. And the Northern Hawk Owl survey also starts on March 1st, but it's basically a variation on the theme of the Screech-Owl survey. And then next month, there'll be another presentation by Kathy Jones, and she'll cover some of the owling that can be done in the central part of the province and in the northern part. So why do we want to do these targeted point counts for these nocturnal birds? One goal is to create these beautiful abundance maps, and we need point counts in order to create these. So here's the map of the eastern screech-owl. Without point counts, we wouldn't be able to generate this type of map. And you can see that they're quite abundant in the southwest portion of the province and become a little more scarce as you move north and towards the east. So how do you find these special surveys, the information on them? You can just go to the Atlas website. Under the tools and resources, you'll see special surveys, and you can either click on that or let this open up on the right and click on Owl and Nightjar surveys. Again, if you click special surveys, this screen will come up and you can click on this beautiful little red screech-owl. Okay, so what you'll see is all the all the different owl protocols down the left-hand side. So Screech-Owl is there, Hawk Owl is there. Those are the protocols we're going to be talking about today. That's where you can find the instructions in the forums and also the playback for doing these surveys. There's also a lot of great training resources on the right-hand side. These are not the playback tapes you'll use for the owls, but you can listen to them and it will let you learn the calls. And it's great because also on that page is some frog calls and some mammal calls, because at night you're going to hear, some different creatures and kind of wonder, what was that? So use those resources there to familiarize yourself with some of the creatures you might hear. Yeah, so if you click on the eastern screech-owl, that little arrow there, this little thing will pop down, and that's where you can download the protocol for how to do these surveys. Data forms are available there, as well as downloading the playback that you're going to want to use for when you're broadcasting their songs. Okay, there's a really big instruction manual online. I think it's like 18 or 19 pages. Basically, any question you could have on how to do these surveys are in the manual. So I strongly recommend you take a look. It's got lots of information in there. We're not going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb tonight, but lots of good information in there. Okay, so the screech-owl surveys are only done in the southern part of the province. As you can see by this green area, as well as around Sault Ste. Marie. And then the hawk owl ones, which we'll get to later, are in the northern part of the province. So if you live in that middle band, maybe you won't be doing too many of these surveys. Here's the screech-owl breeding evidence map from Atlas 2. You'll see there's a lot of yellow dots where it was found in the second atlas, but not the first. And a lot of that probably has to do with some increased effort. I think there was a little more targeted effort to detect these guys in the second atlas, as well as technology getting better in terms of people having playback equipment, to now this atlas where everyone has a smartphone in their pocket, which is, an MP3 player. You've got your calls, you got your data on there. So we'll see how this atlas goes in terms of the amount of data collected and what that shows us compared to the other two atlases. Okay, here's sort of the quick guide for the screech-owl calls, or the screech-owl surveys, sorry. You really don't need to be an expert birder to do these. There's not too many birds calling at night. Screech-owl and great horned owl, you definitely want to be familiar with those. You might hear a woodcock or ruffed grouse, maybe some frogs. But really anyone can do these surveys. The timing's from March 1st to April 30th. So we're going to be able to do these, another week from now, we can get started. They don't take too long. Each point is 7 minutes and you got to do 10 of them. and then you're driving in between. So 2 to 3 hours tops. Those are the regions you can see we're going to be doing them in. Let your regional coordinator know that you're planning on doing some owling. The survey stations are going to be the 10 lowest point counts that have appropriate habitat. Talk about that again later. And you basically want to do it on a good weather night, not too windy, no precipitation, relatively warm. I mean, it says greater than -15, probably not going to be a problem for the Screech-Owl surveys. And then you'll need a smartphone or an MP3 player and a speaker. If you don't have that type of equipment, talk to your RC. They can probably connect you with something, but it's generally not too expensive to pick up some equipment that will do the job. And yeah, you may want to wear some bright colored clothing or a safety vest just to be safe on some roads. So when you're looking at the point counts, you can download the point counts off the website. There's a whole bunch of different maps there. There's a video on YouTube of how you can download these point counts, so you can get them onto your phone and you can drive right to it. Yeah, lots of information there. So here's another map that you can download as well. And so when you're looking at your 10 point counts, you want to do the lowest numbers, and you want to make sure that the habitat is suitable for a screech owl. Screech owls, they're kind of in a lot of different habitats. They're our most abundant raptor in Southern Ontario. Basically any type of edge habitat, anywhere where there's some mature trees, some cavities, like they can exist in a lot of places, even urban parks. Basically just want to avoid like wide open agricultural areas, maybe built up areas. You want to make sure you're not in front of someone's house. You don't want to be blasting screech owl calls late at night. Avoid highways, for instance. So you may even want to pick out what 10 you think are going to work, maybe scout them out in the daylight just to double check, like, yep, that's a good site. And then maybe have a few extras in your back pocket just in case things don't work out quite as you planned when you go out to do your survey. Yes, and we recommend doing them all in one night, but things happen. So if you can't get it all done, it's no big deal. And also no data is good data. Like all data is important. So you're not cherry picking point counts that have the best habitat. And if you record no owls, that's not bad. That's just more data. Yeah, so on the website, this is where you download the broadcast from. Just click on that arrow and that little here sign will pop up there. So the playback, each point count should take you 7 minutes. When you press play, you're going to get 2 minutes of silent listening. Okay, so during that time, you're just standing there listening. Are any owls calling? You might pick up a great horned owl hooting, for instance. And then after those 2 minutes, that's when you're going to start hearing your speaker's going to be blasting out that Eastern screech owl call. And then probably or hopefully eliciting some responses from screech owls in the area. And the calls, it'll play the calls five times. And as it says, 30 seconds of listening or silence after each call. So you'll be at each spot for 7 minutes. This recommends, moving away from your vehicle. Some vehicles have some weird, I know my truck makes a bunch of ticking and humming. So, put the speaker on the roof and walk away if you want. Okay, this is what a data sheet looks like. The key thing I think to notice is that each line is an individual bird. So in this example, at the first point count, you've got a great horned owl. We heard it call during the second minute of silent listening, that we didn't hear it again at all. Reading code is an S. Anytime you hear these owls respond, it's going to be an S. And then you can include information like the direction from you that you heard the bird calling, approximate distance, real basic stuff. And And then for the screech owls in this example, there's 2 individuals. So you record them on 2 separate lines. Do your best if the birds start moving around, but generally it shouldn't be too difficult. So in this example, you know, we had a bird respond during the 1st minute of playback, and again during the 4th minute, and then we had a second individual call during the 5th minute of playback. And again, breeding code is S, and you fill out the direction and approximate distance that you heard the birds from. And then in the conditions and remarks, you want to write down how many cars drove by and what was the noise level. And at the top of your sheet, it's got the noise codes there. So in this example, it was 1, so that's none or slight. So anyway, there's a few options there. And yeah, and you can mention in the comments section anything that you want, really. In this example, the Screech-Owl flew in response to the playback, and they got visual confirmation that it was a red-faced Screech-Owl or red morph Screech-Owl, and that the great horned owl was calling distantly. I think anytime you can add comments is great, because you never know when you're going to be looking back at that data sheet and wonder, oh yeah, which spot was that? Or if someone had questions for you, it's really good to just put down some extra notes. And then as well, you'll see point count location 4 and 5. No owls were recorded, okay, but you still record the traffic count and the noise level. You'll see I said, you know, the 10 lowest numbers, you'll notice they're not in the correct order. That doesn't matter, okay? So, you know, you're not going to drive from 1 to 2 to 3, like just do them whatever, in whatever order makes the most sense. And yeah, I think we can, yeah. Okay, here's some more examples. I don't think there's too much to add. You know, in the comments mentioned some noisy farm machinery, you know, had some more screech owls and great horned owls. And then at the bottom of the sheet, mentioning other species that were heard. Okay, so we've got an American woodcock at station number 4 and a rough grouse at station number 22. So you are able to record other species that you hear. Jumping over to the hawk owl survey, it's very similar. There's no abundance map for them because they're so scarce. So here's what it looks like from last atlas, and you'll see, wow, look at all those squares where it was in the 2nd atlas, but not the 1st atlas. Partly what happened was during the 2nd atlas, there was a hawk owl invasion sort of thing. So they showed up in a lot of squares, and that's where we got some breeding records, you know, further south than we would even expect to have them. And then they retreated back north in subsequent years of the atlas. So it'll be interesting in this atlas with the increased effort being asked to do some specific hawk owl surveys, what kind of data comes from that? Will we see them, you know, across the north, or just, you know, the northwest? Or I think it'll be really interesting to see what kind of data we get from this. And so that just shows you why we're focusing in the north for those surveys. We really don't expect them to show up in down south. Again, skill levels very, very minimum. You're just going to have a few owls calling, hopefully. Timing is similar, March 1st to April 30th. That could be a mistake. I think it's supposed to be May 31st. I think I did a boo-boo when I was copying and pasting. But anyway, check the guide, but you're good to start on March 1st for sure. These surveys are actually only 4 minutes long as opposed to 7. So that's one difference. As it was just explained to me, that's basically because they're quite aggressive. If you're doing the playback, if they're in the area, they're going to respond. And we don't want them, you know, diving at you or your head or your car, putting them at risk for maybe a collision. So just it's a short survey. In the north, also it's during the daytime. That's another difference. They're a diurnal owl. So whereas screech owls are at night, you know, a half hour after sunset, these guys are a half hour after sunrise. it says we can do them anytime during the day, but probably the morning is going to be better for responses. So if you can do the morning, great. If you can't, no problem. Yep, 4 minutes long. Again, you know, put the speaker on roof of your vehicle. Yeah. Yeah, so it's 2 minutes of silent listening. The third minute is when you're going to be hearing the call of the hawk owl that you're playing out, and then another minute of silence. Yeah, so on this chart, you see the difference: daytime for the northern hawk owl, nighttime for the screech owl. And yes, here it is in here showing, yeah, May 31st should be the end date for the hawk owl surveys. Okay, yeah, data entry. Right, you've collected the data. Now you need to enter it on the website. So under tools, go to data entry, special surveys. Or from the Nature Counts website, right there under submit, special surveys. Okay, so you're going to zoom into your square, click on your point count location. Okay, so point count location 01, perfect. And you'll see a list of protocols that you can select from. So you're going to click on Eastern Screech-Owl survey, put in your date. Yeah, date, time, broadcast test, right. So before you go out and do all these surveys, it'd be really good for you to play your playback with your speaker and move away from your speaker so you can figure out how far away you can hear it. And we want you to be able to hear it from a distance of 500 meters. So this is probably easier done with the help of a friend or family member. You know, have them play the speaker and you move, you know, drive down the road, whatever you want to do to measure out that 500 meters. Okay, so here's the data entry, what it looks like online. I got the red arrows showing that's where you put in your traffic count, how many vehicles. There's the noise level. I had tried to submit the data before doing that, so it, you know, put those red asterisks there saying, hey, don't forget this step. And then you just click through what minute interval you were hearing the birds at, each individual on their different line. Drop down menus for the distance, for the direction, for the breeding evidence. And again, you can put in your comments. It's just like the data sheet, really. And then when you review your data, you can print it out, share it with eBird. Just make sure everything is correct one last time, the date, the time, and you get a nice little summary of the species and what you entered. So it's just another check for you. So it's going to be, it is on the app now. So this is what it's sort of going to look like on your smartphone. I found it kind of, it may be a little tricky for you to be, you know, doing the playback, doing the data entry at the same time. So you may want to start writing it on the data entry forms before entering on your app. But if you're really proficient with electronics, then by all means, you can just hammer it into your phone as you go. So again, these protocols are all going to show up. You click on the Eastern Screech-Owl survey. You're going to have a few species to select from, like ruffed grouse, a couple owl species. So when you click on Screech-Owl, again, you just click which minutes that you're hearing the Screech-Owl. So the second minute is the second minute of silent listening, and the 7th minute overall is the 5th minute of the playback. Don't forget to add your distance and direction. So again, each individual gets their own line. So I just wanted to highlight that you've got Eastern Screech-Owl, the first one, and then you've got the second one. So that's how you sort of keep track of the individuals using your smartphone, clicking on add individual row. And then when you go to add another species, same thing, you'll see, okay, I've got 2 Screech-Owls, but now I'm onto the great horned owl. and you can just fill in where it's calling. And this is where, for me, I would get a little jumbled trying to, if I had a bunch of owls calling. So I think I'm going to stick with the data forms at first. And then this is what your checklist review is going to look like. The duration is 7 minutes. Make sure your date and start time are correct. There's the checklist summary, pretty basic stuff. Hit submit. And that's it. Happy owling. I totally blew past I didn't see any, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of questions. And
I think we'll wait till the end and just do all
Okay.
of the questions in one big go after Mike goes.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Adam. I'm going to share my screen now and just shift gears slightly. Go. And Emily, am I sharing?
You're sharing. Looks great.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks, Adam, for the owls. And I'm just going to give a quick update on some of the other things you can be doing this time of year, kind of in the next month. What you can be looking for if you don't want to do owl surveys, but you want to get out and do some atlasing. So the first thing I want to say is don't forget about the idea of safe dates. So I've got a picture here of a dark-eyed junco, which I'm sure a lot of you have in your backyards and in your neighborhoods right now. And dark-eyed junco is a great example because they're starting to sing right now. So they are singing, but we are well outside of the safe dates of dark-eyed junco. So, and of course, in most of your backyards, in most of your neighborhoods, dark-eyed juncos aren't going to stay and nest. They're going to leave. They're here as a non-breeding winter bird. But so some of those breeding evidence behaviors can be exhibited by non-breeders, like singing. So be cautious of those non-breeders outside of the safe dates. So if you've forgotten about safe dates, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, we have these safe date charts, and I know that's a ton of information being spewed at you right now. These are dates that show when the species is in its nesting season, its breeding season, when it's migrating, and when you need to be extra cautious. So those are out on the website. Just to give you kind of a reminder or a quick intro to the concept, they're basically made up of the calendar year, and they show you for a given species. This is the example for scarlet tanager. It shows you when the breeding season is of that species. And the breeding season includes when they're building nests, when they're feeding young, but also when they're, establishing their territory and building their nests and then feeding young out of the nest. So that's the whole breeding season. That's the part that's in blue. And then at sort of for a typical migrant species like scarlet tanager, you've got the spring migration period and the fall migration period. And where that non-breeding activity overlaps with the breeding season, mostly in May there, that's the light blue. And that's the time of year when it could be a breeder, it could be a non-breeder. That's when you've got to be extra careful. The dark blue period is what we call the safe dates, when it's generally safe to assume any bird you encounter at that time of year of that species is a breeder, and you can go hog wild with the breeding evidence codes. In those shoulder seasons, in that light blue period in particular, we really want you to be careful about using, especially some of the possible breeding evidence codes like singing bird and habitat, those sorts of things. So there's a few examples. These are taken right out of the safe dates appendix. So the top one here we've got is Canada goose. And so it's the whole calendar year is shaded in with one color or another because the species is present, at least in the Mixedwood Plains ecozone. It's present all year. In sort of late March is when we expect the breeding birds to start arriving and setting up their territories. Even sooner than that, in sometimes. That's when you start seeing, geese sitting around frozen ponds waiting for them to thaw. There's non-breeders and migrants present for a long time into the spring. And that's why it's not until sort of the early part of June when we get into the safe dates for this species, because there's so much overlap with the Arctic breeding Canada geese that stick around until sort of late May. So that's when the last migrants depart. That's when the safe dates begin. And then the first migrants arrive by mid-July. And that's when safe dates end. So that's the Canada goose example. Eastern Screech-Owl is a great one because we're talking about it earlier. They're present year-round as well. And in the case of Eastern Screech-Owl, they maintain their territory basically year-round. And the only time of year when we really have to worry about non-breeders moving about is sort of from mid-July to late October, and that's when the young are dispersing. So that's the only time of the year when you're out of the safe dates for Eastern Screech-Owl. So it's kind of a nice one because in the Mixedwood Plains in Southern Ontario, we can be using any of the breeding evidence codes anytime we encounter the species through most of the year, including right now. And then the last example I have is the northern water thrush. And this is really similar to the scarlet tanager example I showed you earlier, where the first few migrants arrive, then shortly after they start establishing territories, so the breeding season begins. But there's a period of overlap in May when migrants and breeders are present at the same time. So you have to be a little more cautious. Late May, the migrants depart or have finished passing through. You get into the safe dates, and then it's safe until sort of mid-July when young start or the migrants start arriving. So that's the quick version of the safe dates. We've got videos up on the YouTube channel and previous Sappy Hours that were dedicated to this topic. So hopefully that gives you a quick reminder of the idea. If you're looking for more information about the safe dates, it's under tools and resources on the website. There's a tab called Safe Breeding Dates, and you can pick up the PDFs that show those dates, those calendars, and it's kind of cool because we have it sorted taxonomically or chronologically. So this time of year, it's really handy to look at the chronological list and see, which species are in right now this time of year because they're sorted by date. So check those resources out. Now, having said all of that, there's lots of stuff we can do this time of year. So we're into the safe dates in the Mixedwood Plains, which is basically south of the Canadian Shield. We're into safe dates for great horned owl, Eastern Screech-Owl, rock pigeon, and later this coming month, we'll be into mourning doves and common ravens. So those are the species that you can report any breeding evidence you find. So even if you just see it, you can count it as suitable habitat if it's in suitable breeding habitat. On the Boreal Shield, we've got a couple more species to consider with, we've got one more species, the Canada jay, which will be into safe dates later this week. So lots to look for that are in safe dates. In the breeding season, there's lots of stuff to look for as well. This time of year, one of the best things you can do over the next month is if you have access to a vehicle, you can drive around looking for stick nests. The birds that are building stick nests will be getting active. Some of them are already active, like bald eagles. Red-tailed hawks will be active really soon, building nests. I'm sure some are already working on nests. And then later next month, when great blue herons arrive, they'll be right back to action on their nests. And then I've got northern goshawk and Cooper's hawk there. Those ones you can start looking for their nests, but you can also watch for them doing their early morning sort of flight display. The males do this really cool flight where they get up really high and they do these really exaggerated deep wing beats, and they sort of fly in circles over their territory. So especially first thing in the morning, if you're out and you see one of these accipiters, goshawks or Cooper's hawks, doing that, then they're over their territory and something to keep an eye on for other breeding evidence. We are also into breeding season for a lot of our permanent residents that are familiar kind of backyard birds. So we're already into this period in the Mixedwood Plains, and we'll be coming up to it in the Boreal Shield next week. But things like your backyard woodpeckers, downy, hairy, pileated woodpecker, red-bellied woodpecker, and then black-capped chickadee, white-breasted nuthatch, northern cardinal, and then in the Mixedwood Plains, we've got tufted titmouse and Carolina wren in that same category. Those aren't really present in the Boreal Shield, but the Boreal Shield makes up for it with black-billed magpies. And then a few other species to be on the lookout for are both species of crossbills can nest any time of year. We've got a great article up on the Atlas website under the atlasing articles about atlasing for crossbills, and I know at least in the Muskoka area, I've heard of red crossbills are starting to nest right now. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Horn larks are also starting to set up territories in Southern Ontario. So if you encounter a horn lark doing its flight display, doing its song, try coming back in another week and see if it's still doing that in the same area. And then you can use the territory code, the T code. And then rough grouse and American woodcock should be starting. Rough grouse should be starting to drum in the next month or so, and American woodcock in the next month as well. Once they arrive, they'll start displaying. So there is lots and lots. It's kind of surprising actually how much is out there right now. Already starting to set up territories, building nests, something that we can be looking for breeding evidence. So with that, I'm going to end this slideshow, and then we're able to take questions.
Great. Thanks. We have a few questions already, but I feel like the rest of the participants were riveted by what everybody was saying, you and Adam were saying, so we're going to get a bunch more. And if you're on Facebook, we have not forgotten about you. We see the 19 of you. So ask your questions on Facebook too. We're going to start with a bunch of owl questions. So Adam, you may as well unmute now. I got a bunch while you were talking. So, okay. Here's one. So Derek Armstrong asks, if you're doing your owl survey and there's excessive car noise or traffic that you encounter, should you repeat if you've already kind of begun, or should you just go through it?
Definitely just scratch that point erase the data, scratch that point off, and go to this is why I said have a couple spare point counts in your back pocket in case something like that happens. Might not be a big deal if the playback hasn't happened yet, like the broadcast. If you're in the 2-minute silent period, then what's another 2 minutes of silence? Probably can repeat that, but you don't want to be repeating it if you've been playing Screech-Owl calls for sure.
That does make sense for a lot of reasons. Okay, this one is a question, but I'm not sure. Oh, okay, here we go. It's a bit of a long one. It's from Pete Reed. Hi, Pete. He says, I found only 3 of my 10 sites had Eastern Screech-Owl on the survey, but in the Square area, I have found 14 using around 10 different sites using Playback. They weren't near my points and my counts as survey stations. How will the abundance in the Square take that into account?
Okay, I think this is probably more of a statistics question for a statistics expert, but basically, if I said to you, go to the best Screech-Owl habitat possible, what are the chances you'll find one? It's probably going to be like 100%. But what we want is more of a, what are the chances of getting a Screech-Owl randomly if you stop alongside of the road type thing. So yeah, it's more statistics based and producing the abundance maps that way than trying to count the maximum amount of Screech-Owls.
Yeah, and it's important to note that, I mean, these are two different protocols. So if you're finding these Screech-Owls and recording them in general atlasing protocol, you know, you are still collecting information about the abundant or about the distribution of these owls, and that's important too. Kaylin, you wanted to add something to that?
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, if you do know that there's good Screech-Owl habitat and you do want to go atlasing there, that's totally fine. And to, you know, like you said, add that kind of as a general atlasing, but to do the actual like Screech-Owl survey protocol, you do want to follow the protocol as it's written. So, you know, picking the lowest 10 points out of all of the point count numbers and kind of going through that process. So you do record them in slightly different ways.
Don't mess with the protocol, guys. That's like really what she's saying to us. Okay, good to know. Another one, this is like in a way kind of a loaded question in some ways. So why is Eastern Screech-Owl more abundant in the southwest of the province? Like, can you tell us anything about their habitat requirements?
Yeah, so I was actually looking at the second atlas to try and get how they explained it. And basically they just say, you know, they really like the edge type habitat features, and we have a lot of fragmentation and varied habitats in the southwest. So they like that. And then as you move north and east, you get larger, more contiguous intact forests, and that's not really the kind of habitat that they like. And then maybe you're getting more into, you know, and as you move north, you're going to be butting up to barred owls, and barred owls would love to snack on some screech owls. So yeah, it's just kind of just a general habitat preference type of thing.
Thanks. Okay, you're not out of the hot seat yet. This actually might be for any of you, but Angie Williams was curious as to why we can't use UTMs for coordinates with the owl surveys. Or maybe you can. I actually don't know.
They're the point count coordinates. So I guess that I'm wondering what she means by why can't we use UTMs? Do you mean in the data entry or when you're downloading the point counts? Or yeah, I guess that will kind of change the answer. But if you mean downloading the point counts, you can probably convert them. The reason that you download them in a Latlan is because you can import them into Google Maps or something similar, and they tend to use that one. But yeah, for importing the data, yeah, like for submitting your data, you usually just put in your square number and then you just select the point. So yeah,
so it's already in. Yeah, and there are a lot of it. Like I personally prefer decimal degrees or for lat longs because it is compatible with like Google Earth and things like that. But there's a lot of really free, like easy to use free online converters as well, Angie, if that's helpful to you, that you can use on the internet. Just Google it and you'll find many hits.
There's actually one right on the Atlas website.
Oh my gosh, that's kind of embarrassing.
Under tools and resources, there's a geographic conversion tool, and you can convert from any format. So, and I think that you can read the UTM right on the PDF maps as well, the square maps. But I think it was just a conscious decision that we had to limit it to one format, and decimal degrees is widely used now, and it's so compatible, like you guys said, with Google Maps and stuff. It's only 2 numbers too, which is there's only 2 numbers you can screw up. When you're using UTM, there's an extra number in there. So
there you go. Maybe Angie will become a convert to decimal degrees. Maybe, let's see. But yeah, good luck. And I should have known everything that you would possibly need to do anything with the Atlas is on the Atlas website. You don't need to actually Google anything. You just need to look at the Atlas website a lot more carefully. That's another really good point. Adam, you look like you had something to add before we move on. Do you?
No, I was actually daydreaming back about a different question about, I'll just add it because I'm already going on, but about the Screech-Owls at the point counts versus the other locations. It helps when we're comparing between atlases that people are surveying the same locations. So that's another reason that, you know, if you're getting 3 out of 10, maybe next atlas you'll get it 5 out of 10, and maybe that shows an increase or something. So standardized locations is important between atlases.
Good point. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Great. Okay, so the next one, you've already kind of answered it a few times in different ways. Actually, both Adam and Mike kind of answered this in various locations, parts of the night. But Lynn Vokes, just to reiterate, what's the best time to do the Eastern Screech-Owl survey in the South, please? She also says pros and cons of AM versus PM. But yeah, if you could address that for her.
I think it's if you're a night person or a morning person, like what's easier for you to do, stay up for 2 to 3 hours in the evening or in the morning. I know on Christmas bird counts, I've had them calling, screech owls calling in the morning quite easily. But then again, for me, I'm going to be a little more sharp if doing them later at night than having to do it 2 to 3 hours before sunrise. I don't know if Mike has anything to add to that, but.
No, I don't think it really matters. It does matter for the survey protocol though, right? All right, Adam?
Yeah, so as long as it's a half hour after sunset to a half hour before sunrise, then you're good.
Yeah, and it's easier to do it in the evening, because otherwise you have to time it really well. If you don't want to be like on stop at 9 and then, oh no, it's now half an hour before sunrise because it's taken you longer than you expected.
Although then you can just do a regular point count. Like you can really just make a seamless transition from one protocol to the next. But yeah.
The good thing about March is that the sun is, setting fairly early, right? Like 7 p.m. So you can always do it at that time.
That's true. I mean, if you are, doing other atlasing, it's hard to kind of burn the candle at both ends at times, but at this time of year, it's fine. Yeah, it's a good point. So yeah, Lynn, let's see. Yeah, whatever you prefer in terms of AM versus PM. Okay, Don Sutherland asks this. So this one is for you, Mike Varel. What about Pine Siskin, some of which are starting to sing and also showing up on mass to everybody's feeder this week?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's a good question, Don. I've had pine siskins singing around my property for about a month and a half now, and I have not been able to find any higher level of breeding evidence. We've got, there are nesting records from March in Southern Ontario and Central Ontario too, I think. So they could be nesting now. I mean, there's an abundant crop of white cedar. So I would say for pine siskin, absolutely be on the lookout. I'd be looking for higher breeding evidence than just singing. So, if you see like a pair feeding each other, or, I mean, obviously if you find them building a nest or carrying away nesting material or something like that, that'd be pretty awesome. Yeah, I'd be looking for levels of breeding evidence than just singing, but it is definitely one I think should be on people's radar this year, especially with how many are around and how much food there is on white cedar.
Okay, good point. Now I'm daydreaming. I'm like Adam. I'm thinking about my siskins and like thinking about what they were doing. Okay.
Well, I'll just add to that. When you're documenting these things outside of the quote unquote safe dates, just make sure you put in some comments so that when they review it, you didn't accidentally hit carrying nesting material or whatever. It's like, clear, just put in some extra details in the comments so it gets through the review process really easily and no one's asking for details later.
That's a good point. And yeah, just because something's outside of the safe dates doesn't mean that it can't be breeding, right? Like we know that these things do overlap. So don't think that because it's not the safe dates, you can't possibly be observing this breeding behavior. Just, yeah, that's a great point. Make sure you note it and what it is. Here's a point for you as well, Adam, then. So Brenda asks, why the lowest 10 points for the OWL surveys? Just, yeah, if you can.
Yeah, I think that's just to standardize the protocol. I think it's just, one of these stats thing, try and get people doing it the same way every atlas.
Yeah,
we do it with the other protocols too. Oh, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say that on top of that, like, we don't want you to go and look at your 40 or 50 point count locations and pick your favorite 10 spots or the ones that you think are the most likely to have Screech-Owl, because that's going to obviously skew the results. So it's trying to make it a random selection as random as possible by saying, okay, pick the lowest 10 that are suitable habitat.
Good point. This one, I'm not sure if I completely understand the question, but I think I might. So this one's from Linda. She says she's been asked to record incidental sightings only, not point counts. And by that, I think she might mean general atlasing as opposed to any of the special protocols. And she's just curious to know, is there a way to report those sorts of incidentals or general atlasing on eBird for the atlas, or not? And Mike Burrell, I feel like that's a great question for you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Linda, you deleted the question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if you so basically it sounds like you've been asked to be an atlaser, just not the primary square atlaser. So you can do any kind of surveys you want. You can do what Emily is calling general atlasing, that's what we call it, where you're not doing point counts, you're not doing necessarily these targeted surveys, but you're just going out and collecting atlas information. So if you're reporting it to eBird, just eBird like you normally would, record your effort properly, you know, how far you're traveling, or if you're stationary, how long you're stationary for, and make sure you add the breeding evidence codes to the records. And then when you import it into the atlas, it will go into the atlas as a general atlasing checklist. If you're entering it straight through the atlas, if you're using the app, then you'd select general atlasing as your protocol. If you're doing it through the Nature Counts website, then it's very similar to eBird. You're going to pick the appropriate protocol, whether it's traveling or stationary, those sorts of things. So hopefully that clears that up.
Thanks, Mike. Sorry for deleting the question just as you were going to read it. Another one about some kind of date specific early atlasing stuff for you. Derek asks, regarding permanent residents, especially in the boreal area where I guess Derek's coming from, we have most of these birds that are feeders on a daily basis. So can we start reporting them after March 1st as H, or what's the first code that you can use?
Yeah, so for those permanent residents, if they're in the safe dates, then go ahead and use H. But I think you're talking about those ones I mentioned, the woodpeckers, chickadees, white-breasted nuthatch. So those ones you're going to be getting to their breeding season, but we're still not into safe dates for those species. So we're in that light blue period. And in that light blue period, we want you to be extra cautious. So we don't want you to use those possible breeding evidence codes like H or S or the M code for the multiple singing birds. So the sort of lowest breeding evidence that we want you to enter in that light blue period is things like territory. So what I've done in my yard, I've got a lot of those species, white-breasted nuthatch, hairy woodpecker, chickadee. Chickadee's been singing since about late January. Same with white-breasted nuthatch, same with cardinal, and hairy woodpecker started right at sort of the start of February, drumming. So I waited a week for those birds to keep doing what they're doing, and now they've clearly been establishing a territory for at least a week within that breeding season, and so I'm now using the T code whenever I encounter that behavior.
That's good. Yeah, Angie also asked a really similar question, Mike, and it was about the same thing, but male and female spruce grouse sing together. I think normally when we think about the safe dates, we think of the breeding season and the migratory period overlapping and then the safe date starting. And so it does become a little muddied for non-migratory species, right? So that's a good explanation for both of those questions. Okay, Adam from Facebook. Thank you for asking a question on Facebook, by the way. We like that you're still here. Is there a way to see which points were used for Screech-Owl surveys in previous atlases, maybe on the website, or for a particular square?
I don't think so. Yeah, I'm gonna say no, there isn't. If you're worried like, oh, I don't know what Screech-Owl habitat is, there's some more information in the manual. I'll give you some ideas. And maybe someone in the last year, maybe they had, those locations weren't good because of traffic, or maybe habitat changes, forests get cut down, etc. So it might not even be that beneficial. A lot of things can change in 20 years. So just do your best in assessing the habitat, I guess.
And read the old atlas to learn about what appropriate habitat is. They have a good description in the second atlas about that, even if you can't see exactly what points were surveyed. And I think our final question of the night, unless something's asked at the last minute, is also just about the owl routes. What happens, I mean, if more than one person does a particular owl route? Maybe we can talk about the role of RCs and things like that.
I can answer this if you want. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend reaching out to your regional coordinator for the region that you're intending to atlas, just to kind of ask them if anyone is already doing the owl surveys in that square, mainly because you don't want to go out and obviously be playing this broadcast more than you need to be playing it, and disturbing the owls more than you need to be disturbing them. And so, you know, the proper direction to go would definitely be to talk to your regional coordinators first, and they can let you know if someone's doing owl surveys in those squares and where owl surveys might need to still be done.
And so we're trying to avoid double counting these special surveys for that reason. Thanks, Kaylin. So guys, those are our questions. I know we had a few announcements maybe to make before we log off for this month. Kaylin, do you want to get us started with some of those?
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely get started. So my first announcement is just going to be that I think last Wednesday we sent out kind of our monthly newsletter for February. So it had a lot of info, a lot of really great info in there. So make sure that you're checking your inboxes and making sure that you got it and that you take a look at it. It does talk about a few really cool things like square bashes that are coming up and a block party that we're doing in the Cochrane region. As well as, I guess I talked about Sappy Hour a little bit too. Another thing that I want to mention is that you still have 5 more days for this month's monthly challenge. So this month's challenge is pinning species locations. I did post a video on our YouTube channel on how to pin species locations, both on the Nature Counts app and using the web portal. So any checklists that have pinned species locations will count towards an entry for the prize for this month. So it doesn't matter if it's a previous list or if it's a list from this month or not. So you can always go back to your historical checklists and add some species locations. We mostly want kind of significant species or species of interest for those ones. So definitely take a look at the video and yeah, make sure that you get yourself entered for this month's prize.
Perfect. Any other announcements from Mike or Adam before we head off for the night?
Oh, I guess speaking of prizes, I just tweaked my own memory. We did actually get some winners from the last Sappy Hour for the trivia. So we had a 2-way tie. 2 people got all of the answers correct. So that was Frederic and Frank Panilla. And then we had one person who was our random draw, and that was Katie Thomas. So yeah, congratulations to you all. And I think we've already sent your prizes off. So hopefully you get those soon if you hadn't been already.
Keep coming to Sappy Hour, you might win stuff. Okay, well, thanks so much for your questions, and thanks to the panelists and presenters for tonight. I think this was a good one, and yeah, see you all at the next one, and happy early atlasing.
Yeah, we'll chat soon. Thanks, everyone.